I mean, is a surprise that I'm recommending Arcane Season 2. We had a discussion about Arcane Season 1 a few weeks back. Took Daniel some time to get into it, but eventually he loved it. Of course, it's one of my favorites of the animated series of all time. Season 2 does a sort of really good job of sort of building from where we started off, taking the characters into sort of kind of like new, interesting sort of directions. A little bit fast paced for me, how they're kind of like going through the story, and I kind of wish it wasn't the final season. I wish that they were maybe fleshing out what they're doing across an additional season. But nonetheless, it's kind of more of what you expect from Arcane. Brilliant animation, brilliant music, brilliant storytelling, brilliant brilliant action throughout. It's just good. It's just good. Like I literally found myself saying that a few times after like episodes ended, that it's just good. So for anyone that doesn't know what Arcane is, it's a animated TV show based on the video game League of Legends. Follows primarily the story of sort of these two sisters, how they kind of like break apart and eventually kind of like try to find their way together, and sort of kind of like all the trials and tribulations that come with it. And at the same time, there's this whole like kind of sort of narrative between this upper city and this under city, kind of like stuff that you've probably seen in other sort of movies as well. But the level of storytelling in Arcane is just second to none. It's very, very well done, I would say. So that's my recommendation for this week.
So when we talked about season 1, you said the story would conclude in season 2?
Yeah. Well, there's 3 more episodes coming out on Saturday.
Oh, okay. It's not all out yet. Okay, then ask me in 3 weeks.
Yeah. So ask me again next week when I recommend Arcane for the second time, for the second week in a row.
No, I'm just like, one of my things is that very few shows actually have good endings. And it sounds like they have a very limited scope in mind for the story. Like there's 2 seasons and that's it, and any other spin-off start a new story and so on, which I think it's how it should be in more shows. And I was just wondering if they actually managed to do that in this case.
I would say my concern 6 episodes out of 9 into the season is that we're kind of hurtling towards an ending as opposed to really fleshing out some of the character changes, some of the character development that has been happening in the story so far, in season 2 so far. So that's my only gripe. It's not about the story that they're trying to tell. It's that the pacing of it is maybe a little bit too fast. But again, we'll see how it ends with the last 3 episodes that come out this weekend. I'm going to follow on from last week's one where I said I watched the first 6 episodes of Arcane Season 2. So we reached the ending. Very sad to be at this point, because obviously everyone knows how much I love the series. Did it stick the landing? Somewhat. I'll say somewhat. Again, it was, for the most part, like really enjoyable. I think like episode 7 really like had the feels this season, just kind of like exploring an alternate reality where things didn't go as sort of dark and as like sour as it did in season 1. I still feel like it was rushed. I'm kind of happy with all the characters' conclusions where they left off, with with everyone involved in like whatever part they had to play in their little stories. I'm happy with that. It just felt rushed, and I feel like we could have maybe stretched this out for 2 seasons or so to like really feel the effects of the story that they were trying to tell in here, even though I was still happy with it. So yeah, that's my recommendation again this week, 2 weeks in a row.
Was it like a closed ending, open ending, sad ending?
It was, I wouldn't say it was a sad ending at all. It was kind of like, I wouldn't say your hero's ending. Some characters' stories concluded how you probably expected, happy ending, this, that, and the other. Some were left open-ended in terms of there's possibilities for more. And I know that they are doing more seasons or new stories based on different regions of the world. So there are like some where you can kind of see how they can be involved in other stories and other parts of the universe. And then there's Jinx is left off in an interesting place, and it's kept fans guessing as to where she is, basically. So it's a cool ending. It's a cool ending, I would say, but definitely needed one more season. So I finally got around to watching Transformers 1. It would have been great to do a review on it, but we seem to have got a delayed release for it in the UK compared to the US. So by the time it kind of came about, the discussion had moved on from it. But it's an animated movie about kind of like the origins of Optimus Prime and Megatron and the planet that they came from, sort of their friendship that they had before they became sort of these mortal enemies and sort of on two separate sides of a war. And nothing sort of super complex about it. It's just a nice kind of fun journey with some like really cool characters, and you know really get invested in this relationship between the two of them, knowing what's to come at the end of it. So the whole time you're going on this journey with them, you're just waiting to sort of see and understand the moment where the divide between the two sort of comes. And with that, it's just like really well done, really solid story in this, and just a fun ride with cool Transformer action in there as well.
I want to give a special shout out to season 2 of Special Ops Lioness. I watched that too, and I think that's gonna be my shout out. This is a good one. I've seen season 1. Obviously, thank God the season 2 now, 3 episodes out. So I think it's probably 4. It's featuring Zoe Saldana, and her story pretty much is a mother, and she also works. I believe she works in the CIA, or she's pretty much a part of a special program that pretty much they kill terrorists pretty much. It's a good watch. So I definitely recommend you guys to go check it out.
I was gonna say, I think the thing that you're missing in there is that part of their special op lionesses is that they have to have someone infiltrate the sort of kind of like terrorist organization, or kind of like befriend someone that's close to the target that they want to kill, essentially. And the whole like draw of it is that this person has to find an opportunity to kill the terrorist, and once they kill the terrorist, it's then they have to like then be extracted, essentially. So it's just the threat and the risk level that's associated with that type of operation, essentially. And I didn't even know season 2 was out, because season 1 was like a fun ride. So definitely going to be checking out season 2.
No, I'll definitely say you'll probably gonna receive like a lot of emotional engagement in terms of like trying to see her balance out her profession and her family, and just kind of like the two. It's like it doesn't really. It's hard for them to coexist, and there's sometimes where you're thinking, damn, like is her profession gonna end up affecting her family in terms of her family gonna be in danger? Because even season 1, it kind of is like it's going in a way, it's implying that, and I see it going in that direction. So it's becoming interesting.
My best thing I watched last week was The Death of Stalin, which is a 2017 satire comedy movie, which is set in the Soviet Union in 1953. And Stalin dies at the beginning of the movie, and the movie is essentially about his inner circle trying to manage the transition of power in the Soviet Union, while at the same time kind of dealing with this culture of paranoia and suspicion, and how it's just dangerous to say the wrong thing at the wrong time that Stalin created. And it's full of really good actors that play these various historical characters it's kind of this almost slapstick comedy of errors, where they, first of all, they try to save Stalin and fail, because all the good doctors have been sent to the gulag, and so there's only the bad doctors left. And there's like this 20-year-old medical student who's the only one left, and he keeps insisting that he's old because everybody rejects his opinions because he's so young, and it's just that kind of absurd comedy. And they have to organize the funeral, and then they have to organize the transition of power without a power struggle. And it's just one absurd situation after the next, and it's just a really well done comedy, really well done satire. And I watched this after a recommendation from actually a journalist who studies Russia and knows that history. And it seems to get the basic facts of what Stalinism and Stalin's Soviet Union was like, right? And then builds a comedy on top of that. So yeah, that was a good watch.
So my recommendation for this week, well, my recent thing that I watched this week is a film called Anora, which, by the way, I was surprised that I actually liked this movie. So it's pretty much it's like a Cinderella story, but the Cinderella is a stripper / sex worker, and she is from New York. I don't know where in New York she's from again, but she's from New York, and she ends up meeting a rich Russian kid. So I think his dad is like I don't know who his dad or mom, but I think so they pretty much he comes from a rich family, and then once the news reaches the parents, because obviously they didn't know that they ended up getting married, which they ended up getting married in like Las Vegas. The parents make their way to New York and they try and get their marriage annulled. But during that whole process, like during just in the story, it's just hilarious and it's just a great story, man. It's very explicit, but besides that, it's an entertaining story. You obviously see the Russian influences, you see the Armenian influences, and it's funny, man. It's not just obviously I was actually surprised. It was like a comedy romance type of movie, and those aren't really my go-tos. But when I went to go and watch this one, I was like, whoa, this is actually a very good movie. It's a very good film. I would definitely recommend that one.
The best thing I watched this week is Veep, which is not exactly a new show, but it's a 2012 political satire it's essentially a comedy show about this politician who is trying to become president of the United States. And at the start of the first season, the vice president is kind of being completely sidelined by the rest of the administration. And the 7 seasons essentially follow her attempts to finally become president and kind of maneuver Washington and like politics and the media and all these tripwires that are being set up around her. It's not excellent all the way through, but the first 5 seasons or so are. It stumbles a little bit in season 5. Season 6 is a complete dumpster fire, and 7 then kind of pulls it up back again towards the finish line. But the first 4 to 5 seasons are some of the funniest comedy I've seen in a while. It really deserves its reputation for being just this really funny political satire. It is quite raunchy in terms of its humor, and if you don't like crass humor, then this is probably not for you. But it is, at least in the first couple of seasons, a very, very smart in the way it uses that kind of humor. And they change showrunners after season 4, and that's where the quality starts to slide. But the first 4 seasons I would recommend without reservations.
So something that I liked a bit was called Bagman. That was pretty cool. It was pretty decent. It was just a great popcorn movie, pretty much about there's a father that basically he faces like a childhood threat, which is pretty much like a demon. He is kind of like a demon, and he pretty much like takes his victims and puts him in their bag. But obviously before that happens, he torments them through a lot of, I'd say, through hallucinations in a way. So yeah, it was a cool watch. It was a cool watch. There was some notable actors, Sam Claflin and Antonia Thomas. She was in Misfits and she was in The Good Doctor as well, so she's a good actress as well. But yeah, it was a decent horror movie.
So my pick is season 1 of Stan Against Evil, which is, and I've watched maybe I think the first 7 episodes or so, and it's a pretty episodic horror comedy show about this small town that's essentially haunted by witches, and they essentially put a curse on the sheriff of that town, and so every time there's a new sheriff, the witches try to kill them. And the story is essentially about the old sheriff retires, and he's the only one who has made it to retirement age in like 200 years. And this new sheriff comes from out of town and sets up shop in this small town, and she's out of her depth because she just really doesn't know about the supernatural and the occult and stuff like that. And each episode, essentially a witch or a demon or something shows up and causes some kind of problem, and then the new sheriff has to team up with the old sheriff, who really just wants to watch his World War II documentaries and wants to be left alone because he's done with this crap. Like it is like a very formulaic comedy that is very, very much like if you've seen Evil Dead, it's basically a ripoff of that in terms of creature designs, but it's just episodic fun. You can just put on an episode and be entertained if you like the general vibe of it. And so for that reason, that's my recommendation for this week.